So that's what it looks like. So you'll just have in between all these little bins, there's just going to be gaskets. And one side is going to have ammonia gas, the other side's going to be glycol. And so that heat transfers, just remember always hot goes to cold. So the cold glycol will pick up that warm ammonia, the heat from the ammonia gas, and condenses, and then it comes back down here, and then as a liquid it gets returned back to the chiller.
Okay. Ammonia to glycol. Okay. So ammonia to glycol. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah. And so this here is our glycol storage tank and pump that will pump the cooled glycol through the heads of the compressors, pick up that heat from them so that they won't overheat. Up here you can see this blue valve. It was giving us a bit of grief the other day. Now that's a thermostatic valve where it'll have a bimetal strip in it of some sort, and when the glycol gets up to a certain temperature, it'll open that valve and allow it to go to the condenser tower. In cooler times around startup, it'll just allow it to come back to this tank and be pumped back through here until it gets warm enough to go outside. Last week we started to see that we were running hotter than normal head temperatures on the compressors. And when we started to look, one day we came in here, and where this tank sits here right now, it was up here. And so what we found was that that valve currently failed, and failed in the position where it just wants to circulate. And so we weren't getting rid of the heat outside. And so where we normally run at, let's say, an 80-degree Fahrenheit head pressure or temperature, we were seeing 112, 116. Getting borderline to not being good for the compressors. We had our local refrigeration contractor come in, and we added this bypass here, and so now we are bypassing that valve, so all our glycol goes out to the condenser tower. The downside is if it gets too cold before we get that blue valve fixed, the heads will get cool enough that the ammonia could condense inside. And if you get liquid refrigerant inside a compressor, it's not good. So this is above the scope of our local guy, because now you're getting into not his world. Thankfully, Canada West Refrigeration, our big contractor, will be here next week. They had other work in the area. They've got parts already on hand, and they'll come and rebuild that valve for me, and then we can close this back off and have it run normally.
Ah.
It's good. The weather's on our side right now. It's supposed to be like +8 to 10 for the weekend, so we won't have any issues.
Perfect. Keep the fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly. What else can I show you here? This next here this is our big plate and frame chiller. So this is something new for me as an operator. I've never ran a refrigeration plant with a plate and frame chiller. Nelson, that's where all my ammonia experience came from until I came here. We had 2 shell and tube chillers with a big receiver. We had 1,500-pound ammonia charge. This place here, our rink here in Castlegar only has a single sheet ice, where Nelson had 2. But with this plate and frame, they dropped from about 800 pounds of ammonia charge to, I think, 350 pounds. So a significant reduction in the amount of ammonia on site. Got rid of the extra pressure vessel being the receiver, and now going to a system that you've probably been discussing is critically charged. So we have enough ammonia in this part of the system here that it keeps the system running. We don't need a big tank with extra to top up as it goes. So anything that goes out and condenses comes back right to this vessel here. This will have some ammonia in it, but where the risers go off, so where the suction comes out, there is no chance of ever getting liquid ammonia from here into the compressors. Sure to be catastrophic failure. So much more efficient than a shell and tube, and again, the safety of not having, you know, a significantly lower charge of ammonia on site should problems arise. Oh, we talked about pressure relief valves. So here's your pressure relief valves. This is one for this compressor. Now these guys here are, I believe they're 250 PSI. Yep. So they're 250 PSI, I believe. And inside here is going to be just a little spring and then a little disc on top. And if that high pressure discharge safety that we looked at in the cabinet over there, if it failed, so it's set at 200 PSI. If the pressure gets too high in here, that should shut off the compressor. Things failed. If it failed and the pressure continued to rise from this compressor, when it hits 250 PSI, the plate or the disc will push up against the spring, and then it'll allow pressure to be relieved up in this fire line. And then as the pressure relaxes, that spring will push that disc back in place, and if the upset condition continues, as the pressure rises, it'll lift again and continue to let it off. But by that time, we'll have already had our stack sensor alarm telling us that there's problems through our monitoring station, and then we'll come and turn compressors off and start an investigation as to what the problem is.
Nice. So can I try to explain this in my own terms, since this is my first time here?
Yep.
So liquid ammonia goes into the heat exchanger here.
Yep.
Absorbs the heat of the brine that is in the other fin or the other plates of
Yep.
the heat exchanger, the brine that's come from the rink, that's absorbed the heat from the atmosphere to create the ice. So as soon as the ammonia absorbs the heat from the brine, it turns to a gas and carries on up into the storage drum.
Correct. Yep.
So from the storage drum, as you mentioned, it is piped through again in its gas state into the compressors, where the compressors compress it to increase its pressure. It goes up to the evaporative tower outside in a gas form, is piped through, and cold water is sprayed down from this storage tank, pumped up, sprayed over the piping with the help of a fan, I guess, if needed during whatever time of the year it is, to then return the ammonia back in a liquid state, and it goes immediately to the heat exchanger. Unlike Nelson, that had that big pressurized vessel that stored ammonia in its liquid state.
Correct. Yep. Yep.
Okay, okay. Wow.
JC's got it.
Yes, I'm gonna maybe be changing careers.
So the only other thing we haven't talked about yet is the brine. We talked about the floor, the headers, and all that. So this is our brine pump, and then our supply and return brine lines to the floor. So as you can see here, this is pushing brine out into the chiller, and that's going to give off the heat from the building to the ammonia, and then it'll come back out here and supply back to the arena as a cold brine.